Hello and welcome to Presenting, a podcast where we chat about various topics related to role-playing games, typically Paizo products such as Pathfinder and Starfinder, but also others. I'm John Godek, and with me today is Landon Winkler. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing on relatively short notice and filling in for me so I have someone to talk to. So Landon is a developer at Paizo on the Pathfinder rules and lore team, as well as a freelance writer and game designer. He has nearly a dozen Paizo freelance credits, including Shadows at Sundown Pathfinder 2nd Edition Adventure and The Culling Shadow, Book 6 of Horizons of the Vast Starfinder Adventure Path. I'm actually starting Book 4 with my group of
Oh,
Horizons of the
awesome.
Vast. So, yeah, so I know the whole story. I know the ending already. So it's kind of cool. Prior to working at Paizo, he was lead developer for web games, for the web games Metroplicity and Twilight Heroes under Metroplexity Games. You can reach Landon on Twitter at Landon Winkler. Before we jump into anything else, can you tell me a little bit about Metroplexity? Because
Yeah.
I looked at the site really quick and I'm not familiar with it, but it sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah, actually, those are both still under development, not so much the last couple of months, just new job. And then suddenly, the last month has just been strange and confusing and busy for reasons.
Right.
Um, but Metroplexity is kind of my brainchild. It's a darkish sci-fi cyberpunk sort of setting with a bit of magic,
Mhm.
just some inherent weirdness going on, lots of dreams and the like.
Okay.
Very very based on sort of the mystery, but the game itself is kind of trying to get at that same experience as RPGs when you don't have a DM
Oh,
or
right.
GM available.
Oh,
So
very cool.
really kind of like trying to be a very open experience. So it's text based. There are
Hmm.
images, but it's primarily that. There's the combat system is card based,
Hmm.
um, and the hacking system is would physically work using specialized dice, but obviously don't need
Right.
physical dice to play it online.
Right.
Um, and that's sort of the idea. It's been in development for a long time. It's
Hmm.
you can get sort of through have however much of it as you want. The people who've been playing it for a long time tend to get to the end of where I've gotten and then restart, get to the end of where I've
Right.
gotten and
Right.
restart, sort of like a roguelike.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's where that is. Twilight Heroes is another game that's actually sort of in the same genre. The developer of it had to step back, and he was like, "Well, there's two people who really kind of work in this genre, and one of them is asymmetric. If you've run into Kingdom of Loathing before,
I
that's
have
sort of
not.
like
No.
the most popular one in the genre that we have. But uh, so yeah, he was sort of like, you know, like if this doesn't get handed to you, or like find that lightning in a bottle with fans, it's just going to
Right.
go
Right.
away, and that didn't want to see that. So yeah, that's a really like very tongue in cheek Adam West Batman sort of
Oh,
superhero game.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a completely different sort of flavors, which is nice when
Hmm.
it's sort of like everything gets really dark in the world. Sometimes go over work on Twilight Heroes.
Right.
Stuff's doing a
Got
little
it.
better. Work
Got
on
it.
Metroplexity.
Nice. So, Landon, can you talk a little bit about your journey going from, what you did before and then becoming a developer here on the Pathfinder rules and lore team and kind of even what that job entails now? Because there's been a change in personnel and job descriptions. And, I have a couple good friends that left Paizo, and I know they rearranged things when, Ron Lundeen and Jason Keeley and Jason Tondra all left. Then they shook it all up. So, can you talk about
Yeah,
kind of all that stuff?
sure. Well, as far as the job now, rules and lore really kind of used to be two separate teams. But if you think of it as the hardcover
Hmm.
rule book line and the hardcover Lost Omens line, uh,
Okay.
those have sort of come together because a lot of the rules stuff, especially when you start talking about things like Dark Archive and the like,
Hmm.
it's like 30% flavor, 70% rules, and then you get the Lost Omens line, which absolutely do have still like the 30% rules and 70% flavor. It's like, well, like having the same people working on both of those just seemed like a really
Hmm.
smart decision. So Luis and Eleanor from sort
Right.
of the Lost Omens side are with, you know, Bullman and uh, Michael Sayre and James Case, Logan Bonner,
Right.
all those sort of hardcover lines. So they just got everybody together.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and as a developer, like I'm a little bit in the back as more of a support person, honestly. It's sort of like the goes out. Um, all of the writing for the most part is done by freelancers. So
Hmm.
monsters, for example, you'll have a freelancer. It's like, hey, could you do this monster for us, or these like 10 monsters for us, and those will come back. And at least at this point, what I'm doing is basically going over those and doing like a first pass and polish. So I'm not the one really like deciding what monsters we put in and
Hmm.
really like designing the basic concepts. It's more like, hey, we need somebody to get this to be sort of Paizo quality to fit with everything else. Um,
Right.
because I mean, even speaking as like someone who's done a lot of freelancing, like there are times when I'll send stuff in and I'm like, that I think that was good, but I'm not actually sure.
Hmm.
And now I'm sort of the person who has to make actually sure.
Right. Right. But you're not doing the big outlines for the hard
Mm-mm.
covers. You're not yet. So that's a senior developer kind of position right now, or
Yeah, that's a lot of that is Logan Bonner, James Case, folks like that. As far as
Mhm.
the rules hardcovers, and then Luis and Eleanor doing the Lost Omen stuff. So they're still
Right.
sort of like, as far as where the ideas are coming from, still very much the same places.
Right.
It's just combined so that people like me who are doing sort of like the lower level stuff, frankly, are have a little can help out both places equally,
Right.
and so that the managers of people doing similar stuff we cannot have like a billion managers. We can just have like a
Right.
handful of
Right.
people.
Yeah, I was actually chatting with Dustin today or last
Oh yeah,
night
yeah.
about something, and it sounds like he's very much in a similar situation. I mentioned something that I was looking forward to coming out because there's not many people I can mention that to, and they say, "Oh
Right.
yeah, I made a pass through that," and so I thought, "Oh, well, that's kind of cool." So, how did you get to this position that you started? What, in November? Is that right? Or
Yes, yeah, very early November. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's sort of been a while coming. Um, I've been working on freelance stuff under the OGL for
Mhm.
like about 20 years now, something like that, in varying capacities. So it's been a long road. It is not the road that I would actually suggest people who want to have a full
Mhm.
time job in the industry take. I've done a very I'm not good at networking and I don't like
Mhm.
networking. So
Right.
people could do a much better and faster job than I did. Um, but yeah, sort of started out doing um, freelance writing along with my uh, spouse now, uh,
Mhm.
Liz Liddell, who was doing editing at the time, um, and some other friends of ours like Aton uh, Bernstein, who's over on D&D now. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, just sort of worked through that. 3.5 became Pathfinder, became 2E, and I feel like both of those, uh, for my like personal gaming experience, are huge upgrades. I really love second edition Pathfinder, and so
Mhm.
it's uh, what I use in all of my home games. It's sort of like what I roll with most of the
Right.
time for my designs. So it's kind of like, oh well, at least like that ended up kind of panning out, so to speak. Um, but Yeah,
Now I
sort
have
of
to ask another
your arc
question
gets
because
taken.
I'm learning all kinds of new stuff here.
Yeah,
Um, I did not realize that your spouse was Liz Liddell either.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I interviewed her like a year and a half ago. So it's like, and so now I got to wonder, this whole blow up with the OGL, you were like in the middle of that because
Yeah,
Liz works at Wizards of the Coast as a lead editor for Magic the Gathering, and
yep.
you're a developer at Paizo, and you're on now. She's not directly connected to what was going on there with Dungeons and Dragons, but still, you guys are like in between on things. That had to
Yeah,
be a kind of
we're the only couple
interesting.
that was split like that
Yeah.
over things. And there are definitely like some challenges for both of us. Like there's a lot more. We just have to be a lot more thoughtful about like
Right.
NDAs because
Yes. Yes.
that's potentially a really big deal. But as far as like I'm sure you've heard this a lot talking to Paizo people and Wizards people.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
far as the creative sides go, like we're all like
Right.
it's just the same people. Um,
Hmm.
like uh, Liz, was really worried with the OGL stuff that their Friday Pathfinder game they're doing Strength of Thousands would get broken up because it was like half Paizo people and half Wizards people. And thankfully,
Right.
like everyone was sort of like everything got sorted over. But it's like, and that's the sort of level that we're talking about. Like we're not gonna like the Paizo people aren't mad at the
Right.
Wizards
Right. Yeah.
creative folks and vice
People to
versa.
people.
Yeah,
It's yeah. It's
yeah, they're all great.
talking to some folks I know that went from Paizo to Wizards. There was a lot of negative animosity towards kind of the corporate side of Wizards, and people. There was some concern amongst some of the creatives that I talked to, how people wanted to burn down their job, and they kind of like their job and being creative and doing stuff. So, but yeah, thankfully that is quieted down, and we're hoping that as things move forward, next couple months maybe it's all going to be quiet. I don't know. So, but
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, it's
We'll
hard
see
to
on that.
say.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't
from
mean to bring that up.
oh
But when
yeah,
you
no,
mentioned that, it's
it's
like,
fine.
wow, that's new information to me. I
Yeah, actually,
apologize.
a lot of the work that I've done as a freelancer and contractor is also with Liz. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of stuff that um, we would just like. Uh, either I would write and Liz would edit, or I would outline and Liz would develop. You
Hmm.
just sort of like that. We really did a lot of work, really as a couple, which was a lot of
Yeah.
fun. Unfortunately, we can't anymore because Wizards has really strict uh,
Yes.
non-compete
Hmm.
language in their contracts, and
Right.
Liz is really like lawful good, so um, we're
Well,
not
I
like
think you want to keep your job
coloring
too,
at the
so that
edges.
it's
Yeah, for
good to,
sure, for
yeah,
sure.
do that. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it's I always tell Ron Lundeen that it must be really helpful to his productivity to have an in-house editor. His wife Stephanie is got a
mm-hmm.
PhD in English and basically does editing professionally. So that must have been handy for you on some of those projects.
Oh yeah, no, it was great. We started hmm, um, when we started going to Gen Cons, which would have been around the time that it moved to Indie. Um,
Hmm.
we went to a bunch of seminars run by uh, Sue Cook, Monty Cook's
Hmm.
wife at the time, and that was really uh, where Liz got into editing, and it was very much like hey, writer editor gamer power couple thing, like
Hmm.
this could work out real well. And it's not been fabulously successful. I'm not neither of us are really names out in front of a lot of people, which honestly is kind of how we both like it. But
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, it has been a lot of fun for a lot of projects.
Hmm. Nice. Nice. Well, you know, we mentioned this earlier. Prior to starting at Paizo, you were doing web game design. You were a developer there.
Mhm.
How has that experience kind of translated to the work you do on RPGs? Yeah, tabletop RPGs and design and development.
Yeah, it's um, one of the things that I think is really interesting that helps a lot with improving game design is actually shorter development cycles. You can sort of like try something, see your mistakes, and
Mm-hmm.
try it again and fix it, and refine your craft that way. And it's really hard if you start working on print books, because the lag there is so long that by the time that the book
Right.
comes out, you've forgotten everything that you wrote for it typically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but if you're working on something online like that, it can be like, oh, I wrote some Christmas content on December 18th, and everyone's experiencing it like up until the
Mm,
25th, and like if I'm going to get
right.
feedback, that's when I'm going to get feedback.
Mm,
And that's really helpful. Actually, sort of keeping in the Pathfinder space, that's one of the reasons, Pathfinder Starfinder, that I really suggest newer freelancers try to work on society scenarios if they can.
mm, mhm.
The society feedback can be uh, honestly pretty harsh at times, like the reviews and things.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but you get it way faster,
Mm,
and
mhm.
you get it like you just get much more volume of reviews. Like it will be very rare if you write like a AP volume for someone to be like, "This encounter sucked." Um,
Right.
and like you will include bad encounters in your AP turnovers. Like
Mhm.
uh, that's just going to happen. But when you get a bad encounter in like a PFS scenario, you will actually hear about it, which is,
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, a double-edged sword for sure. Uh,
Mhm.
it's not what you want to hear, but at the same time, like hearing it really does help hone the craft.
Yeah, no, now you mentioned that, it reminds me I should go look at reviews. I didn't even think about that. No, and I better steel myself for that. I teach, and so, like, at the end of the term, we get student evaluations of us in our teaching. I always have to make sure I'm in a good mood, before I go and read those. I'm prepared mentally
Yeah,
kind of thing, so,
yeah, it definitely, like, you have to steel
yeah,
yourself
yeah,
before you go read the
yeah.
reviews.
Very cool. Now, you've been doing freelancing, it's fairly evenly split between Pathfinder and Starfinder. And what are
Mhm.
some of the challenges that you've experienced switching between systems, and what benefits do you see doing design work in both that you can kind of carry over and inform the other?
I mean, it was a bit easier in that, like, short period where it was P1 and Starfinder, and the rules
Right,
were a
right,
little,
right.
more
Yeah.
similar. Um, Really, the trickiest part a lot of the time is just that, um, is when things actually are similar, though, like Intimidate and Intimidation. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
you're just gonna flip them around if you work in both systems. Um, and But that said, one of the things that I like about sort of moving back and forth like that is, first of all, I mentioned before I love Pathfinder 2's rules, and I do like
Right.
Galarian, but
Hmm.
the Starfinder setting is just absolutely my jam. I freaking love
Hmm.
science fantasy. Um,
Yeah. Same.
so when I was originally applying for the developer opening that ended up being this job, I was more or less going for the Starfinder AP developer spot
Mm.
that had opened up. Um,
Hmm.
and actually, I had applied to that as well, the round that Tanjiro got it, which was sort of, I felt was sort of silly. It's like, oh, like if I had known that Tanjiro was the other person, like Tanjiro is
Yeah.
just better at this than I am. Like as far as like
Yeah. He's a
really
tough
like the
one. He's
narrative
he's a tough
stuff.
one to compete against. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, why? I mean, I'm glad that you thought that I was like close enough to
Yeah.
interview, but that seems like a waste of time. Um, but yeah, this so I was more or less reapplying for that. But yeah, it's um, so. But one of the things that's really fun is because you do know both systems and they
Hmm.
have really, I mean, very different strengths at this point. Um, you get to drill in and be like, what is great about, this system? What can we,
Hmm.
how can we play with like things like resolve points with Starfinder? Like, how can we, use that as a reward? How do we really stretch people's stamina to their limits, um, and get that sort of long term uh, erosion over the adventuring day. Whereas with P2, there's a lot more like how can I make skill feats matter here? How can I
Hmm.
get some combats that make the three action economy sing? Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, you get very. I feel like I don't necessarily suggest writing for multiple systems for everyone, but definitely knowing multiple systems is a
Right.
huge benefit. Even if it's just like, wow, this system does like basically everything wrong, um, but you know, you've not only learned like what not to do in a lot of cases, but like there's always going to be some good ideas in there. Like even the system that you hate the absolute most in the world is going to have a couple of nuggets in there that are worth
Hmm.
pulling out.
Yeah, one of the things I noticed from a lot of the more veteran game designers is they play a lot of different games, a lot of, not just even D20 games. If they're a D20 developer, they do lots of different types of games. And I think that breadth really is informative.
Yeah, no, it helps a lot, and uh, even just like sometimes it's hard to get a group together, especially now since 2020. But the even just reading through them and really like or watching actual plays, stuff like that can
Hmm.
be really really helpful.
Hmm. Hmm. So you mentioned one of the things you didn't recommend for novice freelancers to do, but what advice do you have for people interested in becoming freelance game designers and authors? What should they be doing? And especially if they want to get into a position like working at Paizo, working at Cobalt Press, or maybe even I know we won't say working at Wizards, but maybe a job down the road like that.
Well, I will say, like, absolutely no shade to anyone who works at Wizards. Their
Yeah.
pay is extremely good. Like,
Yes.
and their benefits are good, and they get to work with D&D, which, like, I mean, I it's been actually quite a while. Well, I shouldn't actually say that. I actually have a D&D game weekly when we can get everyone together. But I mean, like, I grew up playing second edition AD&D, and D, and
Yep.
that was my jam, and that's really where like I cut my teeth doing design work because
Hmm.
it needed a lot of work to be a
Hmm.
good game. So a lot of DMs from that era got a lot of design chops from just the home brewing that you needed to do.
Right.
Um,
Exactly.
but
Yeah.
yeah, being able to go back and play with that, I mean, I think that's a really cool thing to be able to do. And I do not have any, no shade being thrown in even the slightest there.
Oh yeah.
Um, but that said, the as far as how to get started, um, so the big the big thing to go from like doing like well, I guess to start out with, you want to do really the smallest projects that you can find. So if you find a third party publisher that has had an open call, I'm not sure if they still have this, but I know at least it used to be on the Paizo forums. There was a third party publisher open call thread. And I've
Hmm.
actually gotten a couple of gigs through that. Um, or, on Discord and so forth, um,
Hmm.
Twitter, whatever. And once you start sort of taking those little nibbles. Um, the the trick after that is the part that I'm actually legitimately just really bad at, which is networking and really kind of
Yeah.
branding yourself. Like
Hmm. Hmm.
there's you want to be someone who people know and remember, right? Um,
Hmm.
and that means to some extent like being a public face on Twitter or wherever your social media of choice is, um, for people to find you, but also just like uh, really, um, particularly once you start doing your own products, or pitching products to third parties, publishers. You want to do things that you're really passionate about.
Hmm.
So like if you're, uh, I mean, there's a project that's like, if you just want to do a book of all leshies, it's already taken, but
Yes.
you will absolutely, people will be like, oh, that's the leshy person.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
it's, it sounds silly, but like just having that uh, memory in people's heads. And then a lot of times, if somebody's like, oh, I need, 2 pages of leshy feats for this project. Oh,
Hmm.
the leshy person. Um, and also, yeah, just like, I mean, just talking to people, particularly uh, at cons, which is, I mean,
It's hard
a
now,
challenge now. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Gen Con used to be like really like kind of the almost the highlight of my year. Like Liz and I would always
Hmm.
go to Gen Con. And
Hmm.
this year it's just like I can't in good conscience. Like I would
Right.
come home sick from Gen Con half the time anyway.
I
Like I'm
know.
not
I
going if
know.
they're not requiring masks. Like that's just not a
Hmm.
thing. Um, but yeah, just sort of meeting and talking to people um, is a huge part of that. And it sucks. Like I have really bad social anxiety, so like I'm just bad at it.
Yeah.
But like that is really important. The other, the flip side of that is when you're actually doing the projects. Obviously, you want to knock it out of the park, right?
Hmm.
And part of that is going back through and reviewing it uh, more times if you can, like getting it done a week early rather than like waiting until the deadline. Like sounds like advice for school, but it is good advice for school and it's good advice here too. And
Yes.
then so you have time to get separate from it and then do another read through. And
Hmm.
actually,
Hmm.
I did that with the adventure path that you're going to end
Hmm.
up hitting. Like I finished it almost a month early and then came back and was like, yeah, there's some structural stuff here that just doesn't work very well.
Right. Right. Right.
And as a result, ended up with uh, a much better adventure, hopefully a good adventure. Um,
Hmm.
but the other thing, like the biggest thing that I always try to tell people is um, be communicative with your devs, whether that's a third party person or somebody at Paizo or somebody at Wizards, whatever. Um, Particularly around scheduling, there is a really common reaction with freelancers, myself included, where like, you get sick or like there's a death in the family or you just like freak out, crack under the pressure, whatever happens. And like you're gonna miss a deadline. Uh and it's like, okay, we'll just clam up and just hope nobody notices.
Hmm.
But they definitely will notice, and they will
Right.
feel much better if you have already contacted them, even if
Right.
it's just like, hey, this is going to be, a week late, 2 weeks late, a month late, whatever. Um, and they may not be happy, but they're going to be way happier, and they will trust you way more in the future, knowing
Hmm.
that you
Hmm.
have that skill, because that can really throw a wrench in things.
Yeah. Last summer I had a turnover that was due, and then I had eye surgery, and it was
Ooh,
slowing me down because eye surgery. And so my dev said, "Oh yeah, you can have you can take more time. I'll give you 2 more weeks on it if you need." And I was able to crank it out anyway. I just didn't know how the recovery was going to be. But they're always my experience has been always been very understanding to work with you, whatever it takes. They're not, oh no, man, you can't do this. We don't try. No, no, like you're saying, it's the opposite. They want the communication and to know. So
and it's just so much and even if you do have to like completely back out of something, which happens sometimes,
Right.
the earlier that we find out, like that's just way better. Getting something rescheduled,
So kind of
reassigned.
related to communication with devs, you being a developer, how frequently do you prefer people ask you or tell you that they're available for freelancing? Um, because that's how you kind of get jobs sometimes.
Yeah. I I would suggest not actually telling me that you're available at all. Some
Okay.
people do.
Yeah.
Like I just don't have since at least at Paizo, what ends up happening is sort of the lead for that project is the
Right.
lead developer for that project is the
Right.
one
Right.
who
Right.
assigns it out, and I'm just not there yet.
Yeah.
Um, and so uh, I won't be able to get you any jobs. Like I love talking to people, but it won't necessarily do
Yeah.
you any good. Um, but yeah, I would say it's sort of tricky. Um, it does help if you have uh, particular a particular developer that you normally talk to, um,
Hmm.
and I would say a lot of times that's more like maybe like once a month, or if there's something specific like I'm not going to be available for a while, or what have you. Like if you have some topic that you can, not even saying it just as almost as an excuse to
Have a
run it.
reason to send something
Yeah,
rather than just on a timely. Yeah, and I guess it's the timing because I've heard different things, and I appreciate the fact that you're not actively assigning things, and so you're not looking for it, but you will someday. So people want
someday.
to
Yeah,
know what your preferences are. Because I've heard anywhere between 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, right, depending on different folks. Definitely more than 1 month seems like way too much, just in terms of
yeah,
an assigning schedule and most of the devs are pretty quick to respond back and say, hey, I got nothing now, or yeah, you're on my list. It's going to be a couple months before I can get to you, but I'm definitely looking at you for particular projects and things. And it seems like I'm finishing up something at the end of this month, for example, and I already have sent out a couple of feelers to folks saying, hey, I'm finishing up this one thing for so and so, and now I'll have a whole lot more time and I'd love to do something. And then I won't hear anything for a while. Then out of the blue, I'll get like four things,
yeah,
So it's just
absolutely.
how the cycle just kind of works. And I could probably piece it together and figure out the timing for things, but I haven't done that. And so I just, every
And our
couple months.
schedules are so flexible, and like we would love to be like, oh yeah, we'll be asking people for on August 13th of 2024, we'll be asking for the unannounced book for then, and it might say that in like a schedule somewhere, but like that's not,
Right.
that's just not how it's actually going to play out probably. um
Yeah. It seems like
yeah,
a year in advance is when they're working on stuff, basically. So stuff that's going to come out next summer, they're getting it in this summer, which means prior to the summer, they're doing the solicitations and stuff.
yeah, I
That's
definitely
like,
haven't
yeah,
worked on anything that is even announced yet.
yeah,
So in the last 3 months.
yeah. Oh yeah, no. If something in the last 3 months, probably, unless you had to fill in for somebody who had to drop it, I would think
Right.
that most of that's just the timing of getting to the printers, how long that takes, because Paizo stuff is all printed overseas and brought back, so it takes a
Yeah.
little longer for that. Well, good to know. So you're saying for you, maybe a month at most, but have a reason once a month
Re-
if I'm gonna
like when I'm sending them
when you're
out,
when you're signing down the
that's
road. So
yeah. Well, oh no,
probably
what I
2
mean
years
is
from now.
yeah. But when I'm sending them out, I always try to
Yeah.
have a reason just to
Yeah.
feel a little bit more like it's an actual human conversation.
Yes. Oh, I
Uh,
know. I hear you. I hear you. I usually try to do it when I'm finishing something up, so I can, because I'll say, "Oh, I've just written this thing for so and so, and I'd love to do something for you." I mean, kind of reason for timing
yeah,
for
no,
that.
and that's yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great way to do
yeah,
it for
yeah.
sure.
All right. So, what's next for Landon? What are some of the cool things that you're working on that you can actually talk about? And I'm gonna guess maybe not a lot, but maybe there's something that's been recently announced that you had a hand in.
um,
Treasure Vaults come out. We have
yeah, I
the
didn't actually have any work in Treasure Vault, um, and yeah, I don't think I have any AP volumes pending. I sort of had two that were released. Well,
mhm,
I guess it was Shadows at Sundown and
right. That was a
the
standalone adventure. Or was that an AP book?
that was a standalone adventure. Yeah,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah, yeah.
a lot of fun uh,
Oh,
in
I
sort of
definitely want to
the
do one of those. I want to
follow
do a
up
standalone.
of.
Yeah,
Uh, oh yeah, I mean both working on and I think
yeah,
it's
yeah,
if you like Curse the Crimson Throne and want to go back
yeah,
there, that's what the
yeah,
adventure is there for. And I
yeah.
I ran it and I enjoyed it, so
Very
that
cool.
was a fun thing to work on. But yeah, there's nothing immediately coming up. Really, my next like I've worked on two hardcovers, neither of which has been announced yet. Um, so nothing on my developer plate. Uh, the only
Mhm.
really cool thing that's about to happen is I'm gonna go to Japan in like 2 weeks, so that's gonna be fun.
Oh wow.
That's my current big plans are
Yeah. Well,
traveling.
that's a fun thing. Is Liz going as well, or is this a solo trip?
Yeah, no, it's
Oh,
which is really good. My Japanese is not great,
yeah.
but Liz has just uh, Liz's vocab isn't necessarily top notch, but their pronunciation is just perfect.
That's
So
awesome.
everybody, and also I guess this is separately, our roommate, sort of like the third person in our household, is was born in Japan and
Mm.
only naturalized within the last couple of years. So she's obviously also fluent. So
That's
we're
a great way to practice for you.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
should have way better Japanese. Like I should at least be able to like watch anime without the subs up.
Oh,
But
yeah, that's a good way to learn.
nope, nope. I'm as it turns out really bad at languages. Uh,
Yeah, some people are better. My daughter is fluent in Spanish, and then she just picked up. She went to Brazil last summer, and she picked up Portuguese like really quick. And it's just I'm bad at picking up languages, so yeah, you know,
yeah, I have
stay.
some relatives that are like speak like 7 languages, and I'm
Yeah,
like, can you just like break one of those off for me? Like you don't need
yeah,
7, do you? That's a little unfair.
yeah. Well, sometimes it's a natural ability, and sometimes it's the passion to learn languages. I had a
Yeah,
colleague that speaks 7 or 8 languages, a wide range of them too, and he's now living in Vietnam, and he's very fluent in all kinds of languages over there. It works out well.
yeah, no, it
Well,
is super cool. I'm really jealous of those people. If that
yeah.
wasn't clear,
Yeah. Now there's PaizoCon's online.
yeah.
Gen Con is going to have a presence from Paizo, or
Um,
is that determined yet?
I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
someone does.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think somebody
at
will
least,
go. I just don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
at least I know there have been some conversations about like what the Sagamore is going to look like, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. So there'd be
Um,
something there. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so there might very easily be like the whole normal booth. It's just not my
Right.
my area, so I have no
Yeah.
idea yet.
Yeah. I actually know somebody that helps set up that booth and run it. I should just ask him next time I see him.
Yeah, probably.
Um, what about Origins? Do you know anything about Origins? That's like one of my favorite, big but not too big of conventions.
Actually, I used to live in Columbus. Liz and I
Oh, yeah.
both did, and uh, as a result, going to Origins would be really easy for me, just because
Yeah.
I'd have a
Yeah.
bunch of friends that I could crash with and see people and whatnot. So it'd be great if anybody has to send me to Origins, but I don't feel like the Paizo presence was ever particularly strong there
No, not
while
not
we were living there.
necessarily. Yeah.
It's a really, really great convention for playing games, though. I feel
Hmm.
like Gen Con I go to, and it's like exhibit hall. Like I could
Right.
spend 4 days in the exhibit hall and be a perfectly happy camper. Um, but Origins, it's much more like going to spend some time playing a lot of games,
Right.
which
Right.
is
Right.
also
Well, for
beautiful.
me, most of the conventions, when I went was for playing. And I'm a 5 Nova GM, and before they made it easier to get specials done, you had to play the actual specials at the big conventions. That's the only time where they would,
Right.
to get your 10. Now they made other scenarios that you could do in order to meet your 10.
Oh, really? To get the
And
Novas? Okay.
yeah, so I did like 12 before they made the change, because I prior to the pandemic stuff, I just was hitting conventions, in order to pick up specials, and it's fun. I get to see people multiple places, and do the networking and that kind of stuff. And now I can't go to conventions because I had a kidney transplant 2 years ago, and I'm
Um,
immunocompromised, and this pandemic stuff is still going around and killing people and like me.
yeah,
So
it
I'm
really is.
yeah. So
Yeah,
so I meet people online like this instead.
it's a good way to be. Yeah, I 100% like to people who are ever like, yeah, I like want a really like unique Pathfinder or Starfinder experience. I love like even more than running normal PFS or FSF,
Hmm.
going and running the specials is just
Yeah.
it's a lot sometimes, but
Yes.
it
A lot
is
of
it is
prep.
really electric. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
love it for sure.
Oh, and just the excitement at the end of the whole room, erupting,
Yeah,
at Gen Con or at Origins, where you just have a lot of tables of that. You go to a small convention, there's like the minimum 3 tables, and doesn't have the same effect. But.
yeah. I'm definitely thinking about running them in the
Yeah.
Sagamore right now
Yeah.
at
Oh,
Gen
for
Con.
sure. For sure. Well, Landon, it's been great getting this chance to get to know you and meet you.
Yeah,
And I hope someday I can meet you in person as well.
that would be wonderful. But it was nice to meet you too, and yeah, I hope you have a great con season, at least as far as you can. I'll be doing a lot of the same things, just dialing in from home.
Yep. No, I'll be running online games and doing online HQ. That's kind of what I'll be doing.
That's
All right. Have a great
awesome.
evening.